months. You know what I'm saying? And then when Aaron was 11, his mom got arrested for being part of an underground sports gambling bookie operation that was working out of the family home. So what I'm getting at is there was a lot going on. There was a lot going on. It was said that Aaron's father was pretty hardcore. Like, he would often beat and belittle the kids, like nothing they did was good enough. And if their father was drinking, it seemed to be worse. But usually he would tell the kids, like, you're not working hard enough. They were just never doing, like, the right thing, you know? And as a kid, what I read in the book was that, like, they still love their dad. I mean, as a kid, you just want your parents' approval. So it's like they were just going above and beyond trying to prove to their father that they were good enough. It was said that, like, Aaron and his brother, they lived in constant fear of, like, their father's beatings, which were so bad that, like, at times they would threaten their dad that they were going to call the police, and in hopes that he would stop. But the dad would be like, go ahead, call them, and, like, hand the kids the phone, like, go ahead, do it. And then he would tell the kids, like, if you call the police, I'm just going to beat you even harder. So go ahead, you know? And as a child, I'm sure that's not ideal. You know, sucks. He just seemed really mean. Aaron would say that he remembered his mother, like, throwing his father out of the house on multiple occasions, but she would always end up, like, letting him back in. Aaron's family, they would all get together from time to time, you know, and that's when he saw that his cousins were into cheerleading. And to him, it seemed really fun. And his cousins were, like, really good at it. They're doing flips. They're cheerleading, you know, and Aaron said that he wanted to be a cheerleader because his cousins were good at it, and he wanted to do it too. So I guess he told his parents that he wanted to do cheerleading. And let me tell you, that did not go well. Aaron's dad was just straight up, like, homophobic. He would call Aaron and his brother, like, just awful slurs, the bad ones, all the time. And even in the book, it was saying that Aaron's dad used to say that the way Aaron, like, stood or, like, had his hands on his hips and stuff, he would call him, he would just say, like, don't stand like that, you look like a F word, you know? And it was a lot of that. So him wanting to be a cheerleader was just, oh, hell no. Okay, he was not going to be a cheerleader, and it was not acceptable to his father. So instead, you know, their dad really focused on putting the kids into sports, you know, and they would play sports any chance they could. So they would play basketball, they would play football, and it seemed like their father just wanted, like, the boys to focus on football and be famous football players, really, you know, and just be, like, the best at it. Well, of course, Aaron played football, you know, and he was really good at it. He was really good at it. He attended Bristol Central High School, where he was named High School All-American after catching 24 touchdowns. When he was in elementary school and middle school, it was said that Aaron was, like, really skinny and just kind of, like, lanky, you know, but then when he reached high school, he went through, like, a growth spurt where he reached 6'2", and he got all muscular. And, like, he was practicing harder at football than anyone else. And he would tell his brother, like, dude, I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be the best. And he was, like, just determined to be a star. It's such a shame because, like, I don't really understand the football lingo a lot. But based off what I was reading, I mean, like, he was really, really good and really something special. It's just a shame. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So he's determined to be a star. And things were, like, really working out for him. During his junior year, he had captured the attention of college recruiters across the country. He was getting calls from places like the University of Michigan, Notre Dame, Boston College, and the University of Florida. So it's like, dang, he's got options. Okay, look, this is a side note because, like, I left it out of the script. Technically, like, he was supposed to go to the University of Connecticut and kind of like made a deal with the football coach there that he was going to go there. But then after realizing he had other options, he decided he wanted to go somewhere else. And there was some kind of like drama with that. But I'm breezing past it because it doesn't matter. Just saying that because if you're an Aaron Hernandez fan, you're probably like, why aren't you mentioning that? There you go. Okay, great. So then Aaron's junior year of high school, 2006, Aaron's father, Dennis, he would go in, he was having stomach problems, so he went in for a hernia surgery. You know, it's a routine surgery, removing the hernia, whatever. After the surgery, like, he's healing fine, and then all of a sudden, just like things started to go downhill, and they went downhill quick. And Dennis, his dad, ended up passing away at the age of 49. It said he got toxic shock, and then he died. So again, it was just supposed to be a simple surgery, right? And like none of it made sense. And this was a huge loss to the family. And this is really when things just start going downhill. After his father's death, it was said that Aaron started dabbling with drugs. A friend and like a teammate of his name was also Dennis, he recalled like smoking a lot of weed with Aaron before school, before practice, and even like after football games and stuff. I guess they were high like all the time in high school. Then things got messy. So some of like Aaron's relatives, they also lived in Bristol, and they were close. He had one cousin, her name was Tanya, and she was about like 14 years older than he was. So she was like an older sister to him, an older sister he never had, someone he could totally trust. But after his father died, he learned that his mother was having a romantic relationship with Tanya's husband. So obviously, major shock to Tanya, right? What? Huh? Yes. And also to Aaron. When Aaron found out about his mom having the relationship, whatever, it made him and Tanya grow closer in their relationship. And also Aaron like really started to despise his mom, like really did not like her. So Tanya would end up divorcing her husband, and it wouldn't take long for Tanya's ex-husband to like move in with Aaron's mom. So it was just like, it was a lot, right? Like your dad just died, now your mom's with your cousin's husband, like it was just a lot for him. So Aaron would spend a lot of his time at his cousin Tanya's house after learning about the affair. Like he didn't want to be home anymore. And her house was across the street from the fields where Aaron used to play youth football. So it was just a second home to him. It was said at Tanya's house, that's where he like first really got introduced to weed and to like a lot of questionable.
This fall, indulge in the warm flavors of pumpkin and maple at Paris Baguette.
People. It was said this is where, at Tanya's house, it's where he acquired his streetwise.
What up, world? It's your boy Ed, aka the Toe Goat, man. And we back active early. Right now, we doing.
Alright, so it's been a little while now since Nikocado Avocado broke the internet by releasing his video titled 2 Steps Ahead, in which he revealed to us that he had done the impossible. He had lost all his weight, but did so over the span of 2 years while uploading a huge backlog of content, tricking the entire internet. But now it's been around a couple weeks since it was released, so I ask you this question: has the shock subsided yet? Can we talk about how his weight was never the problem? I mean, seriously, have we forgotten who this person is? Or did that many new people find him thinking this is some sort of a redemption story? Yes, the weight loss is very impressive, of course. But why are people making it out to be like he was born this way? Like he was being bullied for something that he couldn't control? All of this was self-inflicted. He claims that this is all a social experiment. Yeah, sure. If it was a botched social experiment, This monologue of him saying he's 2 steps ahead while being severely overweight in 2022 wasn't even the first time he hinted at this. And let's not forget the real-world damage he has caused to both his audience and other content creators. Excusing that as a social experiment just sounds like a prankster from 2015. But here's the thing. I still believe that he was 2 steps ahead, not in regards to his weight, not in regards to this botched social experiment, but in terms of something else. How his YouTube channel was never about mukbang. No, it was about something way more sinister, a way to attract certain people to consume a different type of content. We'll be talking about Nikocado Avocado like no one on YouTube has ever done before. So strap in, say goodbye to your innocence, and let's do this. Our story begins in Ukraine, out of all places, where Nicholas Perry, otherwise known as Nikocado Avocado, was born. He was adopted by an American couple who then went back to their home state of Pennsylvania and raised him there. He then went on to do a variety of different things before starting his YouTube channel. For example, he majored in violin performance in college and even performed at Carnegie Hall. Pretty damn big deal. He was even interviewed and said that this opportunity fulfilled every musician's dream. Between 2011 and 2012, he made a living as a freelance violinist and a Home Depot worker, and moved to New York City in 2013 to pursue his dream of playing in a Broadway orchestra. But he found it difficult to fulfill this dream when there were so many other talented musicians competing with him. This was also around the time where he would decide to become a vegan. He would meet his future partner and husband, Orlin Home, on a Facebook group for vegan men. This is when Orlin would encourage him to come to Colombia and live with him, and Nick did exactly that. Orlin actually was the one to encourage Nick to make his own YouTube channel back in 2014, and he did. He'd go on to make videos centered around his...
Welcome to the wonderful world of Wilton. Create, share, and fearlessly enjoy every moment.
You have a child, you become a parent. You never have a child, you remain happy. People without kids, what stress is keeping them awake at night? Where am I going to go for brunch?
Vegan lifestyle, and would also upload violin covers. I would argue that the first major turning point in Nick's life wasn't when he created the YouTube channel, but when he made this video titled, "Why I'm No Longer a Vegan YouTuber." This is his oldest video on the channel from September 2016. All the other older videos of him being a vegan and playing the violin have been privated. Guys, this could not be a more normal video. He's out here talking about his experiences with veganism, how it started to affect his health, his opinions on it, the people who influenced him to finally take this decision. It was a very well thought out conversation, and he made a lot of good points. You know, back then YouTube was actually very different. Many of the top YouTubers were converting to veganism and were absolutely imploring their followers to do the same. It felt like a Scientologist cult. So he was one of the first people to go against the grain, and it performed very well. Even though most of his followers were vegan and were following him for vegan content, he still made it a point to explain his point of view without throwing them under the bus, while acknowledging their choices and telling them that this was his choice. His channel was more centered on lifestyle and sometimes maybe featured recipes and eating, but it wasn't a full-fledged mukbang channel until he started with the cheesiest mac and cheese video right here. This video was very significant, not just because he was renouncing veganism, but because this was when he would start making mukbang videos. And he was one of the first American men to do so. Mukbang is a concept that was born in South Korea in the early 2010s. It's about someone sitting in front of a camera, eating, and talking to the audience, socializing with them. Nick's first mukbang video did very well, and within 2 weeks had over 20,000 views. He saw an opportunity, so he kept going. He was incorporating meat into his diet, dairy, any products he wasn't able to eat during his many years as a vegan. But then, as you scroll down through his oldest videos, you will see the first turning point in his entire YouTube career, which led us here today. And that's the video titled, "I Don't Want to Be Vegan Anymore." This is really interesting. At this point, he wasn't fat at all. And yet, I can see very big similarities between this thumbnail and something like this from 2020. He would have this technique where he would make his face more red than it actually is, always highlighting the same spots. You can see this in this thumbnail as well. 2 exaggerated red spots above his eyes, very red cheeks, and of course, the signature Nikocado Avocado crying face. This video was a stark contrast from this video, where he was talking like a normal human being. This one was not only saying that veganism is bad, but straight up making vegans look bad, going up against them. As you can see from the like and dislike ratio, this wasn't received very well, right? Most of his audience at the time was still vegan, and he was practically insulting every single one of them. He even doubles down here and makes another video, even longer, called Why Veganism is Wrong and Makes People Go Crazy. Yet again, taking the same approach with him crying, making these faces, and demonizing all his vegan viewers, saying that he's been receiving a lot of hate comments ever since he stopped being vegan and that he can't handle it anymore. The thing with Nick at this point is that he was only testing the waters. He was curious. He knew drama sold on YouTube, but he wanted to see how far he could push it, and well, it worked very well. More than he could have ever imagined. He was able to measure this level of success when the Daily Mail would make an article just about him, titled YouTube Star Made Famous for Eating Vegan Food on Camera Breaks Down in Tears During a Bizarre Video Rant Renouncing Veganism and Insisting It Is Wrong and Makes People Go Crazy. He loved it so much that he made an entire video just reading through it and talking about it. This to him was his eureka moment, like, oh my god, I know what to do now. This is easy as hell. I'm going to keep doing these over-dramatized videos from time to time, and I'm going to keep eating a lot of meat to piss off the vegans so that they keep talking about me, and that's exactly what he did. You can see
I took two things that I love, dancing and dogs, and I made them into a successful business. Hi, I'm Ronnie. I'm the owner of Ketatov, and I teach
this in his videos. You would scroll down, you'd see him eating stuff, being happy, smiling, and then all of a sudden, Breaking Vegan, the benefits of eating meat again. Yet another inflammatory title towards the vegan community. Same type of thumbnail, where he's looking like he's about to break down crying. You scroll down some more, and then you see My Compulsive Eating, not appropriate for children. You scroll down some more, and then you see I'm sorry, I was wrong. Again, same type of thumbnail. And just judging by the views, there is a stark contrast between the upload before it and after it. And for the most part, it was harmless. This was only limited to himself, and this wasn't the first time someone on YouTube back then was making content like this. One of the best examples of this was Boogie2988. He would play a character called Francis, your stereotypical fat gamer with anger issues, and he would get a lot of views thanks to this. Nikocado was essentially taking a page from his playbook. But one thing you need to really understand about Nikocado Avocado, or just Nicholas Perry, is that he is never satisfied. Every time he reaches a higher level, he asks himself, okay, how can I get even higher? This is when he would start to include Orlin, his partner, in this whole scheme. But here, in order to achieve a grander effect, he would start to blur the lines between fiction and reality. Before that, though, the only interactions they'd have on his channel were positive. They were just filled with wholesomeness. For example, this video right here titled He Said Yes, Mukbang and Recipe would be when Orlin would finally propose to Nick in the cutest way possible. Guys, you have to watch this. It's adorable, especially since everything onwards will be terrible. No, but really, there's something important in this video that most people didn't really notice up until it was too late. Watch.
Good for your skin and your hair.
Orlin, I'm like in the middle of playing. Hold on.
You love your hair.
What's
your hair? But
hold on. Let me play. I'm gonna play this, and then we can start. We'll just put that with the pasta.
No, we didn't know. It's really good for you. You really want this avocado. It's a special one.
Orlin, why are you being so weird? What's wrong with you?
You really want this avocado. You really want it.
What are you doing?
It's an avocado.
How did you? What?
Will you marry me?
Isn't that just so wholesome? I'm sure you're smiling right now, but I have news for you. It was all staged. This was all fake. Orlin actually proposed to Nick in a national park in Colombia, and they just reenacted this whole proposal on the video because they thought it would be fun. You see, normally I would have sat here and thought, okay, well, that's cute. I don't mind. It's whatever. But then I have this realization. If they were such good actors back in 2017, then in this video posted in 2021, is there a single thing that's real here? Did they just become better actors? We'll get to that later. But you can see how quickly things evolved, and they hadn't even gained an unhealthy amount of weight yet. The happiness after this marriage proposal didn't really last long. In fact, it barely lasted at all. All the content involving Orlin after this would be mostly negative, with very few videos being positive. Nikocado Avocado would start posting videos of him complaining about his relationship with Orlin and how bad things were, saying that this is especially sad for him because they haven't even gotten officially married yet and doesn't know what to do. But this wasn't just an exaggerated character anymore. This wasn't just Francis from Boogie 2988 being Nikocado Avocado. No, he would start to touch on some very dark topics, like how some of his attitudes toward Orlin would start to hurt him, how he was dealing with a lot mentally, how he was thinking of evaporating his soul out of his body and leaving the planet for good, if you get what I'm saying. If you were a viewer of his back then, you must have been so confused. It's like, what happened? This is when Nick would start to take full advantage of the compassion and empathy his audience had for him and made it look so effortless in the process, as if he didn't care. And spoiler alert, he never cared. This is also when he would start to film himself gaining weight, saying things like, I don't know why I'm gaining weight. This is so weird. Filming all these angles of his body. You know, there's a reason he was doing this. Even back then, 7 years ago, he knew exactly what he was doing, and I would say that the people involved, the people encouraging this behavior, were already present back then. This is a very important video that serves as the first instance towards what Nikocado Avocado's channel would be for, his dark secret that many still don't understand. I will touch on this later in the video, but just bear in mind, this is when he would start to gain weight in 2017. The weight gain back then, though, still wasn't really a concerning priority. Nick and Orlin had finally managed to get married.
P.F. Chang's invites you to celebrate the holidays with fried chicken and bubbles.
There is nothing straightforward about cancer. Treatment can affect many parts of your body. That's why we take on cancer from every angle. Bringing together our oncologists with our heart, nerve, bone, and mental health specialists to design a plan with you at the center, which means we're treating all of you, every step of the way, surrounding each cancer patient with everything it takes to fight it.
By flying to the US and sealing the deal in a courthouse there. And people were hoping for the best. You know, they seemed happy. They went to Chick-fil-A afterwards as a middle finger to Chick-fil-A because they don't support gay marriage. And overall, the audience was nothing but happy for them. You know, the only dislikes I can think of are people coming years later or vegans at the time. There is, of course, a stark contrast, though, between the comments left 7 years ago being all positive and the comments left 2020 onwards being all negative. And there's a reason for that, of course. After the marriage, though, things between Nick and Orlin would only become more disturbing. In this video titled, Why We Broke Up, coming out of nowhere, it's like, wait, I thought you guys just got married. What happened? They talk about how they had broken up and just reunited together again. And in it, they touch on some pretty uncomfortable topics. For example...
And then he had another, you have another one? Well, you double dipped and you had a mutual friend.
There was like 4 or 5 in DC.
4 or 5, yeah.
Dude, I was like, whoa!
Oh, wow. Okay, there was...
Oh, God.
Okay. Here, they're talking about how many people Nick had slept with while they were taking a quote-unquote break before getting back together. Now watch a bit more and tell me if you can notice something that is a bit obvious. Let's go.
And in New York, there was like 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time I got to London, I was just...
You tried to get like 2 in London, but it didn't work out.
No.
You tried to do one in Pennsylvania, 2 at our friend's house, and it also didn't work out.
My friend's house? Who's one?
Our friend.
Oh.
You tried to do one there, but like...
Okay, I don't know if you noticed, but it's very obvious that everything here is made up. They're making numbers out of their asses, and they're sometimes like looking at each other like, oh, what do you mean? Oh, you mean that? Okay, so this is improv. Their acting, of course, throughout the years has gotten so much better, but back then they still had a lot of work to do. The idea here was simple. Nick had seen how many views he was getting for acting all crazy and thought, you know what, the next level would be to have a crazy relationship, or to at least make it seem that way. This was nothing more than him trying to shock his audience with content not seen anywhere else on YouTube. But people at the time just couldn't tell. You know, there was a massive clue here, the fact that this was uploaded on April 1st, 2017, and still, people couldn't tell. The comments saying things like, the laughing from Orlin looks like it's a defense mechanism and he's just hurting. For some reason, Orlin strikes me as someone with zero confidence. It's really sad. He seems nice, but in a pitiful way. Cheating is disgusting and inexcusable, period. So far, Nick had already done many videos complaining and crying about Orlin and how he doesn't want him anymore. About how bad he thinks he is and how he can't live with himself anymore. And the audience believed it. Why wouldn't they? The reason they must have started watching Nick back then was because, unlike other YouTubers, he was actually honest about veganism. He was someone who would share his ups and downs. He would sit there and eat food and talk about his life and stories that he had gone through. People saw him as a friend they could trust. So at this point, yes, this could have genuinely been an April Fool's joke by these two. Maybe they were genuinely planning on uploading a video the next day saying that this was a prank, clarifying things. But I think seeing the attention they were receiving and seeing the types of comments that were being left on the video only made Nikocado Avocado want to keep going. Why ruin the illusion? Why make people think that they were stupid? Why give that to people? There was
Your child needs these 3 key factors to get into an Ivy League or top 25 university. And it's not having a good GPA or SAT score. Let me explain. 90% of students with a 4.0 plus GPAs get rejected from universities like
Bada bing, bada bing.
This what the myth of it as pioneering boy groups in Japan, manager and creator of the Johnnies, and of this whole concert. This was the Johnny that named the Johnnies. That's who they were named after. Koji is thinking of a way. He's like, okay, maybe I need to ask him for an autograph right now. But before he can even ask, why don't you come work with the Johnnies? We always need extra band hands. What do you think? I'll look after you. So a band hand is someone that travels with the band and they set up and they're assistants, but they're not even like sound check managers. They're just helping set up the stage and stuff. And this is how Koji Matsushita became Kita Koji. That's his stage name. The all-star band member of Johnny Kitagawa's newest band called the Four Leaves. Koji would have everything that he dreamed of.
Wait, so what happened? He became a... what did he become?
He became a band hand, but he started as a trainee at JNA, and he became the newest member of the biggest group of JNA at the time.
Oh, so he became also
a celebrity,
a star.
An idol. He became an idol. Literally just discovered front row at a concert. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And this guy has no background like that. He grew up in a fishing village. Like, he has no money. He works at a factory. And now he's the one on stage dancing, singing in front of thousands of people. He was a literal star. But he was also Johnny's newest victim. Johnny Kitagawa was the CEO and founder of Johnny & Associates, Japan's biggest J-pop management company. So think YG, SM, JYP, Big Hit, or Hype. And he was also a prolific predator. He assaulted countless idol trainees for more than 50 years. Koji had no idea that he was making a deal with the devil. He wouldn't even know until it was too late. He had entered into the devil's den. That's how he describes it. And sure, he's training under this massive company and he would debut as one of the biggest boy bands. But behind all of that, there were these really, really dark things that were just going on behind the scenes. After Koji retired, he wrote a book on everything that happened to him. He dedicated a page to call it His Public Warning, a cry to all the other trainees and idols at JNA Agency. He detailed all of the assaults that he endured under the mentorship of what many consider a predator. And once this book comes out, the floodgates open. Allegation after allegation starts flooding out against the godfather of J-pop. One victim stated, "I wish I could forget what happened. I wish I could." He once visited me when I was at home with my parents. My parents put his air mattress in the same room as mine. That night he placed my private parts in his mouth. You wouldn't believe it. My parents were sleeping in the next room. Another victim said, Mr. Johnny liked to yell from the bottom of his lungs to call someone. Usually it'd be like, "You, come here." And then you'd have to go to the dormitory restaurant, eat with him. And the next time he'd say to a boy, "You, get in bed." That was the one you really didn't want to hear. Another one stated, when I was lying in my bed, he suddenly burst into the dorms. And I was alone. There was no one else in the bed. He slid in beside me, and I thought he was holding something strange. He took it and rubbed it on my private parts. It was like a sticky lotion. Then he continued to assault me, like full essay. I was scared, so I didn't turn my head to look. And it just really hurt. It hurt really badly. And afterwards, he asked me, "Do you want something?" I said, I don't want anything. He said, "You definitely want something, I'm sure of it." I said, "No, no." In the morning, I woke up and there was $500, which was placed next to my bed. Mr. Kitagawa also R-worded another trainee who lived in the same dorm, but he was known as the Star Maker. He could make an idol out of thin air. He could turn anybody into a star. He could make the world fall in love with you, but he would take your soul first. A lot of celebrities are accused of selling their souls for fame, making a deal with the devil. To many people, Johnny Kitagawa was the devil, but he didn't make any deals. He was so powerful, he could just take your soul if that's what he wanted, and there was nothing that you could do about it. So let's talk about JNA. It is often dubbed the boy band factory, and it is founded and run by Johnny Kitagawa. Johnny Kitagawa's parents had immigrated from Japan to the US before the US banned all immigration from Japan. Love the anti-Asian sentiment, okay? Johnny was actually born in LA. Yeah, he was born in LA a decade before the start of World War II. So he's born, and California is a great place to be now as an Asian American. Back then, it was not a good place to be. The US was so hostile against Japanese people, which just resulted in all Asians by extension, because nobody cared to recognize the difference, and nobody cared to recognize that Asia is made up of a lot of different countries. It was pretty rough for the Kitagawa family. Johnny had 2 older siblings, and they all probably suffered some form of discrimination and racism growing up. So the whole family, when Johnny's like 10, get deported back to Japan. The government is like, "We want everyone out of here." Yeah, this is 1 year before the US starts putting Japanese Americans into concentration camps. So they narrowly avoided this. But it doesn't seem like it gets better for Johnny in Japan. I'm not exactly sure how accurate this is, but there's not much that I could find on Johnny's childhood. Apparently, he narrowly avoided an air raid at one point in Japan. So the guy is just like going through a war, and this world war is heavily impacting him. When he's 16, war is over. The family moved back to LA, and LA is just not what you think it is today. It's not big, it's not diverse. It was still predominantly dominated by white people who had a lot of Asian hate left over from the war. Like, what's new? I get it, like, people lost family members and friends in the war, but they took it out on their Asian neighbors who were also American-born citizens. So it's like, what's going on? Where's the common sense? It is not in this room. So Johnny spent most of his time in a place called Little Tokyo in LA. It's like a small area near downtown that's got a lot of Japanese shops, restaurants, grocery stores, and it's just a way for Johnny to shield himself from the hate. He freaking loved it in Little Tokyo. He would hang out there every single day, and he loved going to the theater, he loved watching movies, and he just had a thing for show business from the get-go. Like, he loved it. He starts translating for shows that are coming into town, so if there was like a Japanese singer that would come into Little Tokyo, he would offer to translate for free. Japanese singers would come and tour LA. He would be like, yes, on the front lines, like, I can speak both languages fluently. And it was a pretty lucrative career path. Somehow this leads to him flying back to Tokyo and translating professionally for the US Embassy in Tokyo. We just know that he was translating until he was about 26 years old. That was like his main career. And he was bored out of his freaking mind. It is the US Embassy. He's a low security clearance translator. I'm sure most of the conversations that he's translating aren't even that juicy. They're not even privileged information between the two countries. It's just like, this person lost their passport. And in Tokyo, he decides to coach a middle school baseball team. This is so random, but a lot of people are like, yikes, okay, maybe this is where it starts. Or at least that we know of, it's alleged. I don't know if he was good at baseball. I couldn't find anything in his childhood that indicated he was a baseball fanatic, that he played baseball, but he knew the rules of baseball. So I don't know. He just taught these middle schoolers how to play baseball. And even more random and confusing, these middle schoolers were pretty good at baseball. Like, it's so random. They started competing in baseball tournaments, and after each game, the boys would follow Johnny back to his apartment because these are middle schoolers. Johnny's middle-aged. They would follow him back, and they thought it was so cool that he was this full-fledged adult. He would have all of these imported snacks from the US that were very hard to get in other areas of Japan. It was just fascinating to these middle school boys. He had access to American movies that a lot of Japanese people weren't watching at the time. And Johnny's sister Mary, she's kind of pertinent to this story, but and also to the company later. Mary ran a bar near the US Army base in Tokyo. So Johnny would take the boys there, which again, imagine being a middle schooler being taken to a bar. Like, this is the coolest thing that could ever happen to you. Of course you're gonna go. They would eat spaghetti, which also at the time, another rare food to find in Japan. They would hang out, eat spaghetti, and eat snacks. And these boys are allegedly the first victims of Johnny's predatory behavior. You know how every company has like an origin story? Like, oh, the founder was in his mom's basement. You know the ones? Johnny and Associates, the biggest J-pop agency at the time, has a strange origin story. The story starts with a play called West Side Story. Side note, this is at a time where most plays did not have people singing and dancing. Like most plays were people just acting. It was just straight theater. And it said that singing and dancing plays were popularized by African Americans, and it's entirely possible that the emerging African American music culture had this huge influence on Johnny, considering he was super into jazz and dance. So, which they never get credit for that, but anyway. So he takes 4 boys from the baseball team to see West Side Story, the play. They're singing on stage, they're dancing on stage, and their lives changed. It was ballet meets jazz style. The boys were so fascinated. Johnny took them again to see it the very next day, and then the next day, and the next day after. They went practically every single day until the play stopped airing. They would all giggle on their way back home just dancing through the streets, and they thought about how cool would it be to dance on stage. And Johnny starts thinking. This was at a time in Japan, and I'm telling you, he really was a pioneer for boy groups, maybe even in K-pop, because the way he did it is fascinating. At the time, when you saw a group of men on stage performing and doing anything musical related, it's kind of what you imagine a traditional band. Everyone has an instrument that they play, and they're pretty sedentary on stage. Like, they'll stand there and they'll play their guitar, and you have one lead singer, and most of it is just kind of a little bit of jumping with the music, but that's about it. But Johnny was like, no, what if they don't play any musical instruments and they just focus on dancing on stage? Which is most of the boy groups now, right? And the girl groups. Recently, with the rise of Elvis Presley, Johnny is like, there is so much money to be made in the teenage girl market. So in America, teenage girls were losing their minds over Elvis frickin' Presley, okay? They're going crazy. Not even just teenage girls. The whole world went crazy for Elvis Presley. But Johnny felt it deep in his soul. He wanted his boys to dance. They're already dancing the moves from West Side Story, and they're pretty good. Okay, they were never taught. They just watched the play a couple times, and they know the moves. Johnny's like, I want to make Japanese teenage girls go so crazy for my boys like the American girls go crazy for Elvis.
Wait, and the boys were from the baseball team?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a really weird origin story, no? And so he goes to his older sister, Mary, who runs the bar, and he's like, listen, Mary, the bar. We're about to make teenage girls go wild. So they start a talent training agency together. The first group, the 4 boys from the baseball team, were the Johnnies.
Oh, they are the Johnnies.
They are the Johnnies.
Wow.
He trained them for the next 3 years, wanting them to be the next Elvis. He even invested money in taking them to LA to get more vocal and dance lessons. They even signed a contract with Warner Brothers, the Warner Brothers. They were going to release an album in the States. It didn't really plan out the way that it was, Anyway, no album with the Warner Bros, but a few songs, and they did have a pretty good little peak. Johnny realized that these were the people that were around him when he had this big idea, but he needed to go a different route. He wanted even bigger, and he didn't think the Johnnies could go there. So after a while, he disbanded them and focused on making Johnny and Associates and his next big band, the 4 Leaves, including Koji.
The 4 Leaves?
Yeah, the 4 Leaves. So his agency, he just wanted it to be a household name. He starts holding auditions, recruiting more talent, and the process that he had is very similar to K-pop nowadays. So you want to debut with JNA? Here's how it works. I've talked about this before if you guys follow us on YouTube, but before I met my fiance, I went through a phase in my life where I struggled with debt, okay? It hurt. I was my debt. It's an forever took. Sometimes, out of 100 of boys, like 200 boys that audition, only 2 would become trainees. And not every trainee debuted. The rest were rejected. Then the next step would be training, and the ones that passed would be entered into JNA as trainees. They would have to move into the JNA dorms with other trainees, and they're not just trained in voice and dancing, which are the most important, but acting and PR training, media training, everything. It said that Johnny was very involved during this part of the process. He is so particular about his trainees. He would practically mentor over them for every little thing. The trainees were told, you are not allowed to have your own life. You're not allowed to have your own thoughts. You're not allowed to have your own social media. We control every aspect of your image. If you thought K-pop was bad, the way that Johnny ran, insane. He's basically telling them, you are a commodity of my business, so you don't get to have your own identity. You are whoever I say you are. If I say you like sweets and you're a sweet boy, you like sweets and you're a sweet boy. Everything they did, everything they said was so heavily monitored. It was really crazy. He would personally mentor each trainee and try to give them opportunities to work, as backup dancers, appear in TV or in magazines. But ultimately, that's just if he liked you. Every trainee would be forever stuck in this limbo period unless he made the decision that you could debut. Johnny was the only person that could make that decision to give these trainees an actual career. Keep this in mind. After debut, Johnny is way less involved, but the idols would shift into this very strict manager and PR world and enter the life of an idol. Johnny and Associates was basically a boy band factory. Again, this is when this stuff is so rare. Boy bands back then were instrumental. They were all about the instruments and the drums and the guitar. But now you're talking about a bunch of boys, teenage boys, that are just dancing on stage. This was a completely new concept back then. And it killed it. The business model was ingenious. Johnny was a genius marketer. He understood the average Japanese person and how consumerism worked. He knew that in order for teenage girls to be able to spend money on his boy groups, he needed to not only win the love of the teenage girls, but their parents. He's like, no mom is gonna sit there and be like, yes, my daughter, please go crazy over this half-naked man on TV. So he wanted all of his boys to be wholesome, innocent, good examples, good role models, relatable, someone that even parents could get behind when they were interviewed. That's how he made his boy groups. And it worked. Soon enough, his boy groups were on the cover of every magazine, every single show, every single TV.
So they were the Backstreets of Korea, of J-pop.
Yet every hour of every single day. They were in ads for things like real estate, like contact lenses. They were practically everywhere. Some of his artists even collaborated with big Western names like Bruno Mars. JNA was one of the biggest players in Japan's entertainment industry, not even their pop industry, just entertainment. They were releasing new groups left and right, and the only thing that they had was the ultimate power. Not just a little bit of power, not just a little bit of money, ultimate power. So, fun fact, Johnny did not let anyone use the idols' photos without explicit permission from him. The idols were not caught outside by paparazzi. The idols were not allowed to post on social media. Photos weren't allowed to be used in newspapers or in print or even online. Even JNA's own website didn't have pictures of their idols until 2011.
Wait, why?
He wanted full control of photos and how they get used. He would sue people if they used any of his idols' photos without explicit permission. When it came to music, Johnny owned the rights and masters to every single song that was ever created by any of the idols, ever. Johnny personally has control over the idols' image, their public image, public perception, and their literal image, like literal photos. If anyone wanted to use a song, they would have to get permission from Johnny himself. He controlled everything, which I know what you're thinking, that's freaking annoying. Why would anyone want to work with Johnny? The public loves Johnny's idols. So all of these newspapers, these magazines, these TV shows, they are begging for Johnny's permission because they will get views. They will get revenue because people will tune in as long as Johnny's idols are in their media. He could control basically every magazine, every newspaper, every TV station, everyone, because all of his boys were the it boys. And one of those boys was Koji. Koji has a really, really strong inspirational origin story. He grew up in a fishing village where everyone would scoff at him because, if you tell anyone from a small town that you want to be an idol one day, they're just gonna laugh at you, okay? Koji's parents could barely afford food. They're like, you're gonna be an idol? You can't even afford anything but rice right now. When it was really bad, his whole family gathered around a table of just rice and beans. And if you think about the way that a lot of Asians eat in general, it's a lot of like family sharing. So just to have rice and beans on the table, it's pretty dire financial situations. I think as a kid, Koji starts dreaming up all of these ways of making it big. He thought, you know what, I'm going to be an Olympian. That was his first dream. Olympic champion. His dream was to get a gold medal and represent Japan and make his parents proud. That was his ticket out of poverty. It's not a random dream. He actually was pretty good at gymnastics, but being an Olympian is very, very expensive. He did not have the proper gym, trainers, coaches. He's good, but there's no way he's going to go up against the best of the best athletes with world-class training behind them. He just had to come to terms with it. It's really hard to be an Olympian when you're broke. And life is very unforgiving. So by the time that he's 15, he ends up dropping out of high school and he's
very hard being anything when you're broke.
He's trying to support his parents. This is where his dreams of becoming an idol start. He grows up very fast. He tries taking all these odd jobs in the fishing village, but he decides, I need to go to Osaka, get into a factory, and send money back home because I'm not making good income. This is where he gets exposed to the idol world. It's a bit random, but a lot of these factories, the workers would live in dorms, and they would have this little common room with a TV, and you could eat like ramen and stuff. He and his roommate were the two teenagers. That's it. Everyone else was like middle-aged men working in this factory. And I guess they felt bad for the two teenage boys. So every time the two teenage boys came in, the TV, you know, at the time they only had like 10 channels, and they watched the news. So they'd be like, oh, poor kids. Okay, let's turn on, I don't know, what do young people like? And they would turn on a random show, and it would always be idols dancing and singing, and Koji would get so into it, he would literally drop everything, go directly in front of the TV and dance along, and these old men would just be watching and clapping, and they would try to dance along too. It was like really cute, okay? But Koji was the Johnny's biggest freaking fan, okay? This is before they were disbanded, and they were Johnny's only boy band at the time. Which, side note, Johnny's is now used to refer to any of Johnny Kitagawa's idols.
Okay.
So you're like a junior Johnny if you're a trainee at JNA, and then you could be like, oh, that's a Johnny. It's just a term for they work for JNA. Anyway, Koji freaking loved it. It was the highlight of his day. Koji would go to sleep at night dreaming of his life if he were an idol. His friend was a bit more realistic, and he just had fun dancing and singing. He never thought that he could ever go on stage. So Koji slowly transitions from working at this iron factory to being a band hand. Someone that travels with the band, helps them set up, like an assist, right? And it's a freaking rough job. It is not glamorous. At least for Koji it wasn't. He doesn't get paid well. He has to travel with the band in the cargo car. So he's just sitting on this cold metal floor of the van, bopping his head on the roof, and there's like guitars slamming into him, drum sets slamming into him. It was just miserable. And since he's from a poor fishing village, anytime the band performed in one of the big cities in Japan, people would start making fun of his accent, calling him mean words that are basically slurs to refer to country boys, basically. And he was just so self-conscious, he just altogether stopped talking. He had so much social anxiety. He was just about to quit because of how rough the pay was, go back to the factory, when he heard the band was going to be performing at a concert that the Johnnies were also performing at. So he's like, okay, let me just stick it through, because he didn't even think he was going to get discovered. He had no plans to like go harass Johnny Kitagawa and find a job. He just wanted to see them live in person. He's like, I'm going to quit after I see the Johnnies. And that's when he was discovered. By Kitagawa himself. That's how he became Kita Koji. And the Kita part is in honor of Johnny Kitagawa. Johnny really, really liked Koji. He didn't think that he had a funny accent. He just thought he had a very innocent face and a good work ethic. Koji debuted with the Four Leaves, and they were the next big hit. Koji would even do backflips on stage because remember he has a gymnastics background, and Four Leaves was like the One Direction before One Direction. Koji's hard work, it pays off. He's on TV, he's an idol, but things change. Time goes on and leaves fall. For the 4 leaves, it took 10 years for the leaves to start falling apart. 10 years after they debut, they were disbanded. Audience just wanted something new. And Koji felt like his entire world had fallen apart. I mean, this was his life. What was he supposed to do now? And this is back before, you know, a lot of idols could make a living going on variety shows and being an entertainer, being a personality, or going into acting. Like, this was before that. It's just, you're done. He genuinely thought that maybe he was meant to die with the 4 leaves. He said, our last performance as the 4 leaves, the boys and I sang so loud and we danced like never before, as if we were freeing ourselves from everything that we had experienced in the past 10 years. Fans were yelling at us, don't quit. But they were yelling for people who don't exist. It was all a facade. On the day of our disbandment, I felt like I received my kiss of death. It's such a big emotion, like I can't even imagine it. Koji said that he fell into drugs at this point. He was directionless. He was lost after disbandment. He tried to get into acting, but it didn't really catch on. It proved to be really, really hard to build a new career while struggling with substance abuse. So all he did was write. He wrote a lot to explore his thoughts and his emotions, and exactly 20 years after his debut, he wrote his expose, a book dedicated to his life as an idol, and it was almost a public warning to the newest leading boy band from JNA. He warned them that they are not alone, and what they might have had to do to get where they are is not their fault. He wanted them to know he was on their side, just in case Johnny Kitagawa was sexually assaulting them too. Koji talked about the numerous times he would walk off stage straight into Kitagawa's open arms. How he was just a teenager, but he felt like he owed Johnny something. How he felt like if he didn't do this for Johnny, his career would be over before it even started. He exposed Johnny Kitagawa and said this was his public warning. There is a predator out there offering to take Japan's children and train them into superstars, but he's assaulting them. It was a really, really raw book. It wasn't a way for him to get attention or like back into the spotlight, which a lot of people accuse him of writing the book for that. If you know what it's like in any culture coming out with allegations of abuse against someone so popular and loved, it's terrifying. In East Asian culture, particularly in Japan, where politeness is not a positive but a mandatory, where politeness is the bare minimum, this is not normal. This is not like clout. But he hoped that he could save future trainees from this type of abuse. He wrote in his book that during his trainee days, Johnny would invite him into his room. Johnny would take his private parts into his mouth and would not stop until the deed was done, if you will. Koji said Johnny did this almost every single night for 4 to 5 years while Koji was a trainee. Koji said it was confusing because Johnny would basically convince him that these assaults were acts of love. He made it seem like he wasn't abusing him, he was just taking care of him in a way that every single good caretaker or guardian would. He provided these boys with everything, you know, their lives, their future, and even their family's livelihood. And Johnny knew that. Even if they could see through his mental manipulation, how are they going to say no? How are these trainees going to say, no, that's not an act of love, that's literally assault? There were more than enough reasons for their brains to convince themselves, actually, maybe this is what I want too. Many of them thought that this is just the price of being an idol. Koji said that he lived with Johnny for a while, like a married couple. But once he got famous, Koji felt like he could kind of reject Johnny's advances just a little bit. He finally felt a little bit of power. And it wasn't a lot, like nowhere near what Johnny still had over him, but a little bit of something. He was still terrified of Johnny's reaction to his rejections, but Johnny didn't seem to care. Koji said that he just moved on to younger trainee idols. Koji said this was one of the big reasons that he turned to drugs in the first place. He thought that if the sexual assault during his trainee days was indeed love, it was just the admission price to his dream life. He just thought, this is what I have to pay. And maybe it's worth it if my parents don't struggle anymore. So he convinces himself this, and once he debuts as an idol, he's like, oh, okay, this is what I worked so hard for. And maybe it was worth it, and I'm just so busy. So he's busy with his schedule and everything that he had as an idol. He didn't think too much into it. He tried not to. He just distracted himself. But once the band disbanded, he was left alone with his thoughts, and he was just so torn. Side note, this is a thing that happens frequently when someone is assaulted before they've matured or mentally developed. They might believe that it's not assault, especially if they've been groomed. But a lot of times, these kids will turn into adults and realize that the thoughts of having any similar relations with minors makes them want to gag. They start realizing that what they experience is not love, it's not parental love, it's not big brother love. They realize it's straight up assault. Like, as an adult, they can never imagine doing that, and that's when it slowly dawns on them that they were groomed. That's most likely what happened to Koji. So he releases this book, and it does pave the way for a lot of other victims to come forward with their experiences. But overall, everything is just swept under the rug. And it's not because there's no substance behind these claims, but because JNA has such a strong grip over the media. They are a huge mega corporation at this point. If anyone was going to release any information about these allegations, JNA would cut them off from their idols. And without these idols, these news publications, newspapers, magazines, TV stations, their revenue would be obliterated. Which is crazy because something as explosive as allegations of predatory behavior from one of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry, I mean, you would imagine that it's all over the news, right? So a lot of the public, they understandably thought, well, those are just rumors. If there was evidence, it would have been on like CNN. It would have been on all these big news stations. Some people went as far to claim that Koji was just looking for another moment in the